Yep. All right. So next we got the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, the big story for Miami is Tua Tagovailoa in year two. But the big changes for Miami, and there's a lot. On the losses side, they lost Kyle Van Noy, Shaq Lawson, Bobby McCain, quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, which that does signal that this is Tua's year because obviously Fitzpatrick did start 6 games last year. Matt Breida, who we just talked about, went to the Bills, and center Ted Karras. And then on additions, they brought in quarterback Jacoby Brissett, which I think is an interesting move because obviously he started plenty of games. And so, maybe that's just an insurance thing because Tua has had injuries, but maybe it could mean more if Tua does struggle. And also, that's quarterback that head coach now Brian Flores
B-Flow.
is familiar with during his time in New England. They also added linebacker Bernardic McKinney. They traded with the Houston Texans to acquire him. Added linebacker Shaquem Griffin. A couple of cornerbacks in Justin Coleman and Jason McCourty, who once again Brian Flores has familiarity with from his time in New England. Running back Malcolm Brown. That's an interesting spot because the running back, I think, is one of the more interesting position battles they have going on right now. Wide receiver Will Fuller, which I was a massive fan of because I think that he's just a game-breaking type of wide receiver. Center Matt Skura, tackle Greg Little. And then the draft, they had one of the better drafts, I think, in the whole league. In the first round, they had 2 draft picks, got wide receiver Jalen Waddle, absolute monster from Alabama, edge rusher Jalen Phillips, who we just talked about, a beast at Miami, outperformed Gregory Rousseau in the same system, although it was separate years. And then safety Javon Holland out of Oregon, a guy who many people thought could potentially even go, first round, but he was a second round pick. And then tackle Liam Eichenberg, another second round pick. And so for me, I was pretty high on the Dolphins offseason. I liked a lot of the additions they made. They were a team that was on the brink of going to the playoffs last year. And I think because of some tiebreakers, that's why they missed it. And like the additions they had, they just added a lot of players that are really quality guys, right? Like linebacker Bernardic McKinney. I think that's a really underrated one. He's been really solid for the Texans throughout his career. Justin Coleman and Jason McCourty. That's some really nice depth for a cornerback room that features Xavier Howard and Byron Jones and first round pick.
Noah, I'm not even gonna say
yeah, Noah, whatever his last name is. So, I mean, now you have 5 really good cornerbacks. Like those guys being your 4th and 5th corners, that's a luxury right there. But that's the Patriots way. I mean, this is something that Bill Belichick does, and we'll talk about this maybe a little later, but he's really big on investing into a secondary and getting top tier talent. And so I'm not surprised that Brian Flores is doing something similar. I already talked about Will Fuller. I was a big fan of that addition. And even to add on to that, I loved getting him and Jalen Waddle. I felt like both of those guys and the game breaking speed that they have, I think it could just provide a new dynamic to this offense that just really hasn't had that. Mike Gesicki's a monster. Devontae Parker's good. Myles Gaskin, Malcolm Brown, solid running backs, but they didn't really have that guy who can like take the top off the defense with his speed. And now they have 2 of them, 2 of the best deep threats potentially in the NFL, as long as, Will Fuller can come back from a suspension and be all right. And then Jalen Waddle can develop.
First game of the season.
Yeah. So not going to miss too much. And then like I said, I just thought they killed it in the draft. Jalen Phillips, he's a monster. There was some potential injury concerns, but if you're going to take him 18th, you have to be comfortable with, what you've heard about him and moving forward. And the talent was obviously there. I think without the injury concerns, he would have gone even higher. Javon Holland, I was a big fan of him too. With the Cowboys needing a safety, I wanted them to get him. Miami obviously took him before we could even get a shot at him. And that secondary is just so freaking loaded, man. And then Liam Eichenberg, the one thing I do have concerns about with this team is offensive line. And so I like that they addressed it with, a solid second round guy. He's from Notre Dame, I'm pretty sure.
Notre Dame lineman. So he's going to be solid probably because they all have been pretty much.
Yeah, Notre Dame linemen are always good. There's a few schools like them, Wisconsin, who, when they produce offensive linemen, they're good. And so, yeah, with the additions they made, it feels hard for me to keep the Dolphins out of a playoff spot, but in a really competitive AFC. I mean, because you talk about like the AFC North with the Ravens and the Browns and the Steelers, all 3 could potentially be playoff teams. Now this division with multiple potential playoff teams, the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Raiders potential playoff teams, right? But with the Dolphins additions, I can't see them not improving off of that 10-win season. And so I think they could be legit contenders with the Bills for this division, but I think it all rides on the back of how well Tua can, do in this offense. And I don't think there's really an excuse for him to not be better than he was last year. It felt like he was pretty good at being conservative and safe last year, but I think with the weapons they gave him, I think it's time to really fully unleash him and just see what he can do, and stop relying on your defense to win you games when you just throw for 100 yards. But what do you think about this Dolphins offseason?
Yeah, just to continue what you were saying about Tua. I mean, he did mention, during the offseason, he didn't really have a full grasp of the playbook. And like we've kind of been, like John has basically been saying, we've been saying this is very New England, light, basically. This is
right.
what Brian Flores is trying to bring a lot of New England concepts, and they have one of the more complicated offenses. And remember, we have to remember they didn't have a preseason last season, and there's all the COVID was definitely going on and all that uncertainty. So and he has looked better this preseason. He's been a little bit more aggressive, and so there is hope. I mean, yeah, we're not saying that. When we were criticizing Tua, it's just because a lot of people were saying he was the next big thing. We're like, calm down. He's got flaws. He's got a lot of flaws, and we saw that last year. But obviously, still worthy of the first-round pick. They still believe in him. But yeah, regardless, I mean, whether Tua progresses or not, as long as he doesn't regress, this is going to be a competitive team.
Right.
Like we saw at the end of last year. I mean, John just hit it off. I mean, a stacked cornerback room, very similar to New England, and like New England too, they invest. They get good linebacker depth because, like I think we mentioned this in another podcast, linebacker's a physical position, and those guys tend to get hurt a lot. They're kind of like running back too. It's good to have good depth there so you can filter them in and out. But yeah, draft pick wise, I mean Jalen Waddle, like we mentioned in the post too. Like I was still high on him, but I wasn't as high on him as John was. But preseason, he's already shown he can be there. He's working the slot. Be their Julian Edelman, Wes Welker type guy, but he can also play on the outside, if Will Fuller does get hurt or something. And so that would be huge for their offense. As much as we both like Jalen Phillips, once again, this is going to be a New England style type team, so don't expect Jalen Phillips to be getting a lot of sacks because New England just believes in getting pressure as opposed to getting sacks, which can be two different things for New England. That's why they're never really high on their sack totals. But yeah, I love what they did with addressing some things on offensive line. Traded, I think it was a 6th-round draft pick for Greg Little from the Panthers, who I was kind of high on coming out. He hasn't really impressed, but I feel like he hasn't really gotten the chance over in Carolina, so now he does in Miami. And then, like John mentioned, Liam Eichenberg, another solid tackle. And the line wasn't that bad last year. I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't that bad. So taking the appropriate steps, and I think, also, I mean, didn't they traded back too, right to 10? So I think they still have additional picks next year. Regardless, they have picks. Like I think they have they have their first rounder. I think I know for sure. I'm not sure if they got another one from San Francisco. Regardless, I know they have picks. They have
I think they traded back, but didn't they then trade up?
I don't know. Yeah, they did, but I don't remember what they gave. But
they traded up with Philly, right?
Yeah, Philly was at 6, and Philly traded back, and that's when
I can't remember what they gave up.
10. I don't believe it was much. So regardless, I mean, because San Francisco, I think they gave 2 first-round picks to move up. So regardless, once again, Miami's gonna have ammo if they need to address the offensive line, or if I'm crossing my fingers, knocking on wood for him, but if Tua, they're not impressed with Tua after another year, another good quarterback on them, in the draft. We have 2 first-round picks this year. Next year, let's move up, push the chips in, get him, and roll with that. I mean, because like we just said, this is going to be a very good team, very good roster. I expect this team to definitely be in the playoff conversation and definitely be pushing the Bills in regards to the division. The biggest thing is just the biggest question mark too, if they can win the division, is going to be Tua and the offense. Can they do enough to help the defense out? So,
right. And by the way, I don't know if you saw these reports. I mean, I think they're total BS, but apparently the Dolphins are still front runners for Deshaun Watson. There's been recent reports that they've made traction on a potential
Yeah.
deal. I don't believe those for a second because a guy who's dealing with 22 sexual assault allegations right now, no, and the price is reportedly 3 firsts and 2 seconds. No team is going to pay that until
Yeah.
something gets figured out. But I do think that the continued rumors about Miami being interested are true. And I think, like you said, they have the ammunition if they do want to move off Tua to go get a guy like Deshaun Watson. And I think it would almost work out in their favor if Tua does have a pretty solid year this year, but maybe not a year where they're so sold that they're not willing to move off him for Deshaun Watson. Then maybe Houston changes their mind a little bit because reportedly they weren't really interested in getting Tua back in the Deshaun Watson deal. But I think just with the state of their team potentially this year, they might be a little more interested now. I don't know if it's because there's a quarterback they're really high on in future draft classes, but yeah, I mean the ammo they have is pretty absurd when it comes to draft picks, and then also to and just the talent that they can move. So don't forget about them in a potential move for Deshaun Watson, or if Tua doesn't work out this year, like you said, moving up for another quarterback in a different draft.
Yeah, I think just real quick before we end that on the Dolphins. If anything, I think I would believe the reports are true, but we aren't hearing what the Dolphins are offering, and I feel like the Dolphins are just telling Houston, hey, we'll give you 1 first or 2 firsts, and that's our price, and just letting you all know in case because it seems like Houston. I think I read the report they are gonna because Deshaun Watson has been put on the commissioner's exempt list. That they are gonna go with him on the 53-man roster, but he's just gonna be inactive every week until this sorts itself out. So I think Miami's just doing that and say, okay, y'all, and if y'all ever get sick of paying him for doing nothing, send him over here. We'll hold on to him until this clears up, and then boom, we got him for a lower price than asked for. But yeah, that's definitely an interesting development that we'll have to see what happens with the Dolphins and the Texans.